I cleaned the house like I did every week. But inside the room where he kept his fishing bait, I found a paper that said he had sold the home we once called ours. The brown envelope sat buried beneath an old rain jacket and a tangled reel. Inside was a stamped deed of trust, declaring a loan secured by a house I thought was still ours. I turned away, but my hand stayed frozen on the doorknob, like letting go would drop me out of the life I knew. I had folded up a whole life. There was nowhere left to place it. Have you ever been part of a family betrayal story and not even known it? Her name was Ruth Ellen Simmons, 66 years old, a retired internist who had spent over 3 decades treating the same families in a small clinic outside La Crosse, Wisconsin. Her voice, once so steady in exam rooms, had grown quieter in recent years. Retirement had slowed her pace, but not her routine. She lived in a rented apartment on the east side of town with her husband, Wayne Simmons. He was 69, a part-time grocery clerk who said he kept working for the exercise. Ruth knew better. He needed the money, or maybe the control. They had been married for 32 years. No children, just a long rhythm of quiet dinners, a calendar taped to the fridge, and a home they used to call theirs, an old wooden house in Galesville, nestled between the orchard lines and the lake. It had a back porch made of warped cedar, a wood stove that still burned too hot, a vegetable garden that came alive each spring. That was where she wanted to grow old, but they had not lived there in over 5 years. The place had been leased to a young couple with 2 children. Wayne had suggested it. "We can't maintain 2 homes," he said. "Better to collect the rent." Ruth had nodded. They needed income. Their retirement savings weren't what they should have been. She had left too many decisions to him: taxes, insurance, even the final say on the lease. Still, she believed in waiting, in coming back. Wayne never spoke of returning. Every time she brought it up, he dismissed it with the same shrug. "The heater's always broken. No dishwasher. It's not livable." Then he'd turn back to his racing form, those glossy pages with horses' names and odds scribbled in pencil. She hated that habit, but she didn't stop him. That was the quiet compromise of their marriage. She would avoid conflict, and he would avoid telling her the full truth. There were signs, the envelopes from Westfield Bank that came addressed only to him, the drawer in the bedroom he kept locked, and the Saturday mornings he disappeared for fishing trips, always with that same patch tackle bag and the cheap cooler. She knew something was off, but her suspicion never outweighed her exhaustion. Until that morning in March, Wayne had left before sunrise. He said he was going north to meet friends near Trompier-L'Eau. Ruth stayed home and cleaned, like she did every weekend. She gathered laundry, changed sheets, dusted the baseboards. Her hands moved on instinct. It gave her peace. She entered the second bedroom, the one Wayne called his space. Inside were bins of tools, old shoes, fishing lures, and baseball caps from decades past. She had rarely touched any of it. She bent to collect a sweater from under a bench when her hand knocked against something hard. It was a wooden crate, wedged behind a broken oar. Inside was a brown envelope. No return address, no markings. She opened it. There, among folded bank papers and a worn copy of a loan application, was the document that shattered her. A deed of trust, secured against their home in Galesville, signed by Wayne Simmons, notarized, dated 3 years earlier. Purpose: securing personal investment funds. The investment, a transfer to a private online wagering account, horse betting. Ruth stood still, her eyes on the paper, her ears catching nothing but the hum of the old ceiling fan. Her knees trembled, not from age, but from the quiet earthquake taking place inside her. She didn't shout. She didn't call him. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed and stared at the far wall, where the framed photo of their wedding day had hung for decades. It stayed there, still. But something inside her broke. This was no accident. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a decision. A choice to erase her from something she had helped build. Later, when she would describe it, if she ever did, she would say it was like walking through a door that led nowhere. Like realizing the key you'd carried all your life opened nothing that was truly yours. The betrayal was not in the loan, it was in the quiet, in the assumption that she would never look, that she would never ask. This was not just a bad choice, it was financial betrayal in marriage. And it wasn't just a mistake, it was a family betrayal story, written in ink, hidden in a box behind a pile of rusted tools. She stood, smoothed the page, and returned it to the envelope. Her hands shook as she closed the crate, not because of the paper, but because now, finally, she knew. The house in Galesville was gone, lost to a signature she had never seen, a decision she had never been part of, and the life she thought they were building. It had been mortgaged away without a word. She had believed love was its own form of insurance. That loyalty, over time, would protect her from betrayal. But when a signature can erase 30 years of shared life, belief is not enough. Wayne chose to sign the loan papers. That was his deception. But Ruth had chosen not to ask questions for too long. She had left the paperwork to him, avoided the tension, and trusted silence more than truth. Neither of them upheld their part of the contract they called marriage. That night, after he returned from Tempé-à-l'Eau, she waited in the kitchen. The paper lay on the table. He walked in whistling. When he saw the envelope, his whistle died. He said nothing. She asked only one question. "Why didn't you tell me?" Wayne sat down, took off his cap, and muttered, "It wasn't your name on the title." Her breath stopped short. That one sentence was a wall. A quiet war had been fought, and she never saw it coming. Ruth did not yell. She did not beg. She stood, her hands braced against the table's edge. Her eyes never left his. He looked away first. In that moment, she understood he had never intended to grow old in Galesville. He had placed his bets elsewhere. She called her niece, an attorney in Madison. By the following Monday, Ruth was in her office, trembling slightly, holding a folder of documents. Her niece reviewed the loan agreement, property title, and bank records. The home had been solely in Wayne's name since the year they married. He had purchased it before their union, and never added her. That was the first legal crack. Under Wisconsin law, marital property is subject to equitable distribution, but the ownership status of premarital property, if maintained separately, can complicate any claim, especially if the asset was never commingled. But Wayne had used rent from the house to pay joint expenses for years. He also deposited proceeds into their shared checking account. That opened a door. Tracing those transactions became the strategy. Ruth's niece guided her through every step. They ordered full financial disclosures. They subpoenaed Wayne's betting records. They gathered tax returns from the past 5 years. Ruth signed an affidavit outlining her financial contributions and intentions regarding the home. Then came the hardest step, filing for legal separation. It was not just about division, it was about protection. Ruth needed legal standing to freeze joint accounts, prevent further dissipation of assets, and secure temporary residency rights if Wayne tried to evict her from their current apartment. The process took 6 months. It was slow, exhausting, but methodical. Wayne, faced with court orders and documentation, eventually agreed to a mediated settlement. Ruth did not get the Galesville house back, but she received a portion of the loan payout and retained access to the joint savings, enough to start again on her own terms. For Ruth, it was never about revenge. It was about ending the silence. In truth, what had unraveled wasn't just trust, it was a map of their entire life. a map that showed how often women her age are erased from financial decisions, from deeds, from futures they helped build. This was not just a failed marriage, it was a lesson written into the fabric of a grey divorce, a warning to every woman who believes her past guarantees her place in the future. Ruth had once dreamed of harvesting tomatoes in the backyard. Watching the sky turn pink through kitchen curtains, she sewed herself. Those were her retirement dreams. Now, she harvested bank statements and legal documents, but at least they were hers. And this time, she knew where they were kept. Ruth did not go back to Galesville. The house, and everything that had once lived in it, now belonged to someone else. The past had a lock she no longer carried a key for, so she chose something smaller, quieter, a cottage near Trompiello Lake, tucked behind a row of birch trees. There was no garden yet, but the windows faced east, and she liked how the morning light came in without asking permission. It took weeks before the silence felt like company, not punishment. She started by learning how to make coffee without a machine, just water, a filter, and her hands. She found peace in the weight of simple things: folding clean towels, hanging wind chimes, planting hardy perennials in mismatched ceramic pots. Her body had not changed. Her grief had not vanished. But she moved differently deliberately, without apology. At the edge of town was a small community center. Once a week, women gathered there, most of them older, most of them quiet. Some had left homes, others had been pushed out of them. They did not talk much about men. They talked about paperwork, about new banks, living wills, passwords, and power of attorney. Ruth did not speak for the first 3 meetings. Then, one day, she did. And the room didn't blink. For the first time in her life, every document had her name on it. Every bill, every lease, every emergency contact form. She was no longer waiting for someone else to include her. She had done it herself. There are rooms we never enter, corners of our lives where we are not invited, not written in, but that does not mean we have to stay locked out forever. Ruth had once been part of a family betrayal story, one where love blurred legal lines and trust stood in place of a signature. She does not talk about Wayne anymore, not because it does not hurt, but because it no longer defines the story. Now, when women sit beside her and hesitate before speaking, she leans in and says just one thing: check the title. Do not just live in a home, confirm that you legally exist inside it. Do not wait until you are cleaning a closet to discover your name was never there. Say it out loud. Ask it out loud. Is my name on this? And if you have ever been silent in your marriage, leave a small mark below this story, a single period, a quiet sign. You are not alone. You are part of a room full of women who have finally stepped through a door that was never open to begin with.